Okay, so recording is started, and I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. Uh, so when you are mapping out your uh, Knowify account into QuickBooks and making sure that everything is filtering into the correct accounts, using the correct service items, using the right bank accounts and credit card accounts for all of your payments, it's really important to make sure that you're using all of your items correctly in Knowify. And what's really important is to make sure that you have this QuickBooks Sync page or QuickBooks module set up correctly. This is just where you're going to find it. Depending on the size of your screen, it might have to be hidden in this More section, but it's one of your modules down the left-hand side. And when you go to QuickBooks, you'll open it up and see these tabs at the top. Basically, each of these tabs controls a different thing around your QuickBooks Sync and how it's going to be pushing data from Knowify to QuickBooks. The transactions is actually, not really a setting as much as this is just a feed to show you everything that's moved back and forth between QuickBooks and Knowify. So anytime you create an invoice or a client or really anything that syncs back and forth in either Knowify or QuickBooks, this transactions tab that you're going to see is really going to be where you get to just make sure that everything is synced correctly, and you can get a kind of like an audit trail of everything that's moved back and forth. Expenses defaults are going to be how you can control everything that syncs on the expenses side of Knowify. So things like your bills, your payments, general expenses from cash or credit card purchases. This is going to make sure that you get everything into the correct payment and expense accounts. Income defaults, very similar, but you'll see that this is going to be around client invoices and client payments. And this is going to be a little bit more service heavy than expenses. And I'll get into a little bit more of that, but you'll see that kind of based off of the natural way that QuickBooks likes to accept data, we actually use services more often than income accounts. Your job defaults will be for some very specific things, such as your service that you use to sync time entries into QuickBooks, your services for deposits, and your journal entries for retainage. And this is also where you can set your classes for each job, just so we can label everything with the correct class in your QuickBooks account. And catalog defaults is actually a part of Knowify that syncs up with QuickBooks kind of as far as their catalog of products and services go. This sets the default income and expense account used on each individual item. This is kind of why it's so important to have your product and services list and your catalog all synced up and running correctly in your Knowify account. This is where we can get the really detailed costing into individual accounts on QuickBooks. But I'll start with the expenses defaults. Now, we call these defaults because they can always be edited in your QuickBooks account. But what you're setting here is kind of like a funnel of how we feed information into your QuickBooks account. And I always like to start with company defaults. Now, we can get very detailed in our sync, but what you're setting with the company default is the overall expense account that, let's just say, for all intents and purposes, all of my expenses from Knowify go to. I have mine set to uncategorized expense. Basically, I'm telling Knowify, if I didn't specify anything else, then just assume that it's something that should be uncategorized. You can see that we also can set a default payment account. This will be one of your bank accounts, or if it's relevant, a credit card account, just so we know where to pull the payments on bills, or if you're going to push a cash expense, which bank account it should be coming from. And your accounts payable should always just be set to your main accounts payable in QuickBooks. This doesn't really have to vary. This is pretty standard procedure as far as the setup goes. Now, I mentioned that all of our expenses are going to go to uncategorized expense. If we were doing some very simple accounting, that would be fine. But we want to be able to get into more detail, and that's where these vendor defaults come in. The reasoning behind vendor defaults is, let's say if it's something with ABC Supply, I don't want it to go to uncategorized expense because I know that everything I buy from ABC Supply is going to come from, is going to want to go into my job materials expense account. This way, Knowify will reference your vendor defaults first. This will always override whatever you have as the company default. Same goes for the payment account. We're always going to look at this for the vendor before we look up to the company default. That's just our way of making sure that you don't have to use these overall ones. However, if there's a situation like I have with Amazon.com right here where there are no defaults set, that's where we're going to reference your company defaults. So this is basically your way of saying, unless I otherwise specified for this vendor, you should be using this expense account. But obviously, with your most common vendors, you're going to want to make sure you have the correct account set. The next tab you'll see is your income defaults. Very similar. You set your accounts receivable to whatever your main accounts receivable is. But what you'll be doing differently here is instead of setting an income account, you set an income service. This is because in QuickBooks, you'll notice that every line of a invoice requires a service from the catalog, a product or service, rather than you using an income account. Those will be associated with an income account. But this way, if you're not using services in Knowify, you have the option of actually tagging a service as the default. So basically, this is saying if I invoice something that isn't an item in my catalog, then you should still carry the description over, but the product or service should be defaulted to construction services. Payment account works just like with expenses. This just shows where we're going to be putting the payments in when you record payment on an invoice. Obviously, if you do this in QuickBooks, that takes precedent. But if you want to record any payments in Knowify, this is where we get the data. And then we also have a customer default section for your income, just like we do with expenses. So in this situation, my client, Elliot Simon, all of my income for him doesn't go to construction services, it goes to hours. Again, this could be overridden if you're using actual services when invoicing, and I'll be covering that when I do a quick demo of the inside of Knowify. But this is our way of saying, if I don't use a service and it's a invoice that I'm sending to Elliot Simon, assume that this goes to my hours service and the payment still goes to savings, but I can always override that as well. Whereas with Gary Johnson, again, we don't have anything filled out for him, so we're going to be defaulting this to whatever we have set as our company defaults. But again, with invoices, it's always important to know that if no default is chosen for our client default, we will go to default income service. But either of these could be overridden by having your services actually used from the catalog in your contract and invoices. Now I'm going to get into job defaults. This is a little bit different since it's not really specific to income, specific to expenses. The first thing it asks me is my default service for time entries. Now, at this point, Knowify can only use one service when it pushes time entries to QuickBooks. But every time entry in QuickBooks requires a service associated with this. So this is where you would set just a default overall service to push in with every entry. If you do not have anything selected here, time will not sync, and that's an important thing to note. It's actually one of the more common errors we'll ever see in a sync. I set mine to hours. This is actually a default that comes in with most of your QuickBooks Online subscriptions. And this way, anytime I approve of a time entry, it pushes into the weekly timesheet using hours as my service. Default for deposits is only if you use Knowify's deposit feature. It's something that needs to be enabled by our customer support team, but this is just our way of saying, all right, when we push an invoice to QuickBooks that is created via Knowify deposit, this is the default service that should be associated with it. Again, this should be associated with an income account as far as the actual service goes, but this is the product or service that's going to go next to the description line in your invoice. And then if you do AIA billing, one of our features for accounts in the States, this is the default account we're going to use for all of the journal entries that we create to reflect retainage. It's not an actual amount of money that's going to be in either end of the there's no actual cost that's associated or actual revenue in retainage, but we create a journal entry, and this is going to be which income account we push the retainage to. You'll see below that I actually have a list of my jobs. This is where you can set what classes we associate all of our transactions with when we push to QuickBooks for each job. So like any of my invoices that I create for the 123 Avenue A construction job is going to push to the commercial class just because this is a commercial job. That's actually the most common thing we see in classes is having someone break down their jobs into commercial and residential so they can run reports on those. Basically, whenever you start a new job in Knowify, if you need to map it to a specific account, you just come to this jobs defaults, make sure it's set here, and then it'll be good moving forward. Same goes for locations as well. The next page, and this is the last page of default in Knowify, and this is actually significantly different than a lot of the other defaults, because this is actually a way of managing the default accounts for all of your services and products in Knowify from the catalog. But what makes this different is this is actually a feature that syncs up with QuickBooks, in that whenever I make a change here, this will actually update in my QuickBooks products and services catalog. So like I have building permit, it's a product, if we sell it, it's sales. If we have to buy one, it's under supplies and materials, kind of randomly set these. But what's relevant is if I make an adjustment to these, since these products and services all sync with QuickBooks, it'll change the default account in QuickBooks too, since they also offer this service. So what I'm going to do now is open up my Knowify account and show you a little bit more of how this works firsthand. I have my my QuickBooks account here as well, just so you can see what it's going to look like. What I'm going to do is open up my QuickBooks module. Here's the transactions feed, just to kind of show you an overview of this. This is just showing me each item. Complete just means it was a successful transaction. I can see what type of item was moved back and forth, what was happening. Was it created, deleted, updated? And then origin is if it was created in Knowify or if it was created in QuickBooks. For instance, I created a new item in my QuickBooks account called drywall and doors, so we pulled it in. These clients that are being created are actually sub-customers that we created to be associated with jobs. I can cover that more later if you need to see it. And one neat little trick about this transactions feed that I always like to show, if you see a transaction that was created in Knowify and you want to see it in QuickBooks, like here's my invoice that was created in Knowify, number 132. If you click this button that says complete, it actually opens up your QuickBooks account to that specific transaction. It's a nice way to get a little bit more relation and a little bit more back and forth with your QuickBooks and Knowify account. You'll see here that my default was set to construction services, and I used two items that weren't in my catalog, and so it automatically went to the company default. But I'll get into more of that while I go through my income defaults. But let me get through my expenses defaults first. Now, I'm going to create an expense for, let's start by using the company default. So I'll create an expense with my Amazon.com vendor. And we have a bunch of different ways that we can set this up. What I'm going to do is set it up as a credit card purchase, just so you can see kind of how this is going to be working. I'll say this was paid for with a credit card. And here's another thing that can sync with QuickBooks. You just need to put in a request and we'll actually pull in your accounts. So I'll say this goes to my Citi card account. And basically, this will match up with my expense transactions, or my banking feed rather. So if I log an expense, QuickBooks is going to take its time. If I log an expense, it just needs to, sync up with an item for my feed. So like here's key food, here's 38.33. Basically, this gives me the option of choosing my credit card account for payment. Amazon.com, miscellaneous. What did I say? It was 38.33. And this is I can always map it to a job as well. Whatever it may be. And when I submit this as a credit card transaction, it automatically closes itself out. But when it pushes, it's going to use my uncategorized expense account, since that was the default for my Amazon expenses. Here's another little shortcut that you can use. I could say, open up this expense in QuickBooks, and it'll pull it right open to that specific page. And then when it comes to my account, uncategorized expenses, and then I specify that it was with the Citi card. Otherwise, it would go to my default payment account for the company. Next, what I'll do is use ABC Supply. And just to go back there and kind of reference this, you'll see that ABC Supply is set to job materials as my default expense account, and my savings account is the payment account. So I'm actually going to skip the purchasing side and go right to my bills. I'm going to add a new bill. I just got a bill from ABC Supply. And I'm going to go ahead and just add a manual item, pointed at some job. I'll just go ahead and use lumber. And, it's 100 studs of lumber. Now, when I submit this, it'll send the bill to QuickBooks, of course. I can see right now this thing's pending. I'm just going to refresh the screen. It'll show me if it is actively synced with QuickBooks. Of course it is. Now, we have ABC Supply set to job materials, so I'll see that that overrides. And of course, I can record payment in, wasn't supposed to have this turned on yet, but this is actually another feature. I was going to cover this a little bit later on, but we actually have the option to sync up with your item details instead of account details. So if you want to have your expenses sync under this specific page instead, we can have that be an option. I'll cover this more later, but let me set my account back to the default transaction. A lot of people like to do this just so they can run reports on different items and how much they are spending on those items instead of going to the default expense accounts. And obviously these are actually all tied in with specific items as well. So that's just the other option. You know, it just gives you an extra layer of detail. It really depends how you prefer to see things. There's no reason that you need to use one or the other. It's entirely just up to your preferences. So let me go ahead and set this. Well, you know, just for the sake of kind of saving some time, I'm going to go ahead and just move on with this one. But basically what you would have the option to do, just like you saw earlier with Amazon, we could push to specific accounts as long as we're not using items. And then what I could do, so let me go back. Basically, you just put in a request for what item you want to be the default instead of the account, just like we do with our income. And that's what we're going to be using to push to QuickBooks as your expense default item here. We covered how the default expense account is going to work. Again, this one got skipped, but basically we would have the option of mapping to this specific item, this specific account, instead of going to the overall like we did with Amazon. As far as payments go, so let's see if I have an outstanding bill that I can use as an example here. In fact, I should be able to use that same one. So what I'm going to do for ABC Supply is record a payment on this. Now, my default account is set to checking for the company, but for ABC Supply, I have it set to savings. So I'm going to go ahead and record this payment. And just like anything else, you know, we'll actually be able to see in transactions this log. Here's a bill payment that was created in Knowify. Again, if I look at my expenses defaults, I'll see that, you know, this is set to savings, even though the company default is set to checking. And so if I click on complete and open up this payment, I'll be able to see this synced up. This is, again, something that usually people like to record their bill payments in QuickBooks just so they can get a little bit more functionality out of it. But if you record it in Knowify, you'll see that it defaults to my savings account. Now I'll get into my income defaults. Now, this is actually a little bit different, again, because it leans a little bit more heavily on our services. And so I have, you know, my default set to construction services, and I'll show you how that's going to come into play. And we can do it right at the invoice level, but what I'm going to show you is how to do it when creating a new contract job. So I'll create a job here under my good friend Carl Client, and I'm going to skip all the budgeting. You know, obviously we can go over that in other demos in the future, but right now I just want to focus on this thing. So I'm going to go right to simple mode and start creating the contract. Now, you'll notice that when you're creating your contracts in Knowify, it actually uses this type of head. So like if I were to type drywall, it's going to pull up all different items I have. Here's a service I call drywall and doors. And if I click this, I get this little catalog icon here on this item. This is my way of knowing that Knowify is actually recognizing that this item is the drywall and doors item that is in my catalog. That way, even, you know, regardless of what I write here, let's say I'm charging $1,000, it's always going to invoice this and use this as the product and service in the invoice line. For what it's worth, we also have the option. So like, what if I say like 1010 building permits, and this uses the item, but I don't want my client to see this cost code. So what I'm going to do is actually delete this. But you see that the catalog item persists. This is still here. Basically, as long as this item is still showing up, that means that this is going to be using the item that we initially used to create this line. And what we'll use here is just the description. So I'll say, you know, we're charging $300 for building permits. That's going to work as well. And now I'm going to add another line item here. And what I'm going to do here is say, this is miscellaneous. I don't even know how to spell the word miscellaneous. Some other construction related line. Really struggling on the typing today. So I can come in here and say, like, all right, this is for $3,000. Now, what you'll notice is that there is no service set as the service for this line, or no product or service from the catalog. So this is going to go to my default. And in this situation, since I have jobs and subclients on, it'll go to the default for the project. I'll cover that in a second. But otherwise, it would go to the default for Carl client. And this is all going to happen upon invoicing. So what I'm going to do here is just go ahead and make this project active, like so. And now I'm going to submit an invoice. I'm going to go ahead and submit a partial invoice just for the sake of example. I'm going to say, let's invoice the first 10% of this. And now we'll go ahead and finalize and send this to QuickBooks. And I'll do a refresh to see if it's done syncing. And I'll go ahead and view this in QuickBooks. Now, I'm going to open up that contract really quick while that's loading up. Actually, no, I'm going to open up my defaults for my clients here. Under income defaults. So I'm going to show jobs here instead of clients. And what was my project number there? I can actually find out here. Project 831. Now, this is set to construction services because I didn't have anything set, so it automatically filled in the default for me, and it said the default payment as savings. But if I open this up, I can see that building permit new to sync to building permit. My drywall and doors sync to drywall and doors. But now here's my construction services as the default, automatically populating here for my some other construction related line that I put in. So you'll see how, if we use specific items from the catalog, and even though on my invoice that I created, let me pull that one back up. I ended up switching the phrasing back on this, but even though I can change the phrasing on each of these, it still knows what item to associate with all of these different lines. So I can edit the text however I want. Again, since I have already edited this one, it won't let me, but let me come in here and say, change order. And so let's say the item's active already. Now I called it change order just to make it a little bit simple. And I didn't put an item on that one, so it's going to go to the default. I'm going to call this change order 2. And I'm actually going to add, I'm going to do this. I'm going to change the wording on this one, because this is one without a service. I'm going to call an item change order, and I'm actually going to make a service called change order. Now you see if I add here, I get a new service. This is where my catalog defaults are going to come into play, and you guys will see this in a bit. I'll go ahead and save this, and this change order is going to be for $2,000. I'll make it active. Now, anything that was created with a catalog item, you'll see that it creates this item even after the item is active. This is showing me that I'm using that service, but I can always make an adjustment here if I need to. Even though this is change order, I want it to go under the installation service. And so that way we can sync to something different if we ever need to. So I can always invoice this and it'll go to installation. And I'm going to go ahead and change my company default, or sorry, my job default for this project. So 831, even though it's normally supposed to go to construction services, I'm going to call it cabinet installation. So now we're going to reference that when we're invoicing instead. I'll go ahead and invoice these 2 lines. And so now you can kind of see why it's so important to use these different catalog items. This way you get a little bit more control over how you're going to end up syncing everything with QuickBooks, and you can get really detailed as long as you use the specific items. This is how we're going to end up making sure that you use the correct product and service. And since all of those are associated with income accounts, it'll go to the correct income account as well. Just go ahead and pull this one up for the sake of example. And so you can see that this one defaulted, I guess it didn't take yet, but basically this went to my company defaults, and so that's what I had set. And then this one went to installation because that's what I edited as the change order number 2 product or service. So that's basically how our income defaults work. One thing I didn't actually cover is payments. It's the same idea where I can record a payment in Knowify, and it's just going to use the default account. Again, we do see that people prefer to record payments in QuickBooks so they can get more specific use out of this. But I just created a payment in my Knowify account, and if I come back and check on my sales to see that payment, it'll go to the savings account because that's what I have set as my company default. And this is actually a different one, but it's the same general idea. So we've gone through our expenses defaults. We've gone through our income defaults. Let me pull this up again, and I'm going to open up my job defaults. I'll show you how the service for time entries is going to work, and I'll show you just how class tracking is going to work. This is where I can say, like, this is for a residential job, so the next time I create an invoice for this, it's going to push to that class. But I believe we push classes with time entries as well. I'm going to go ahead and enter some hours against this job, and it's got to be a client that I have synced with QuickBooks, who I believe Paul Simon is my guy. And I'll say he did some time for 831, labor materials, golden, and I'll just log, 3 hours for today. And this is just the time being submitted. As far as the sync goes, it has to be reviewed first. So I'm going to go ahead and approve this entry. And that'll create an entry in my QuickBooks account. Again, I can see if it's synced here. Here's time, create Knowify, 3 hours for Paul Simon. And if I open up my weekly timesheet in this account, and pull up Paul's timesheet, I can see that it used the class associated with this job and it defaulted to hours. And so, we can always make adjustments here if we need to. A lot of times people like to get more specific than this. That's why we showed the phase name of the job, so you can make adjustments here if necessary. But that's how we can carry over and persist, classes, locations, and an overall service item to go in and be associated with everything in your catalog or all of your time entries. The last thing we'll cover here, our catalog defaults. We can see that these defaults are set, and I'll show you how that updated the change order that I made. But I also just want to note, so like here's cabinet installation, and right now I need to set a default expense account for it. When I change something, if I do this, it's under job materials. This is actually something that's going to sync with QuickBooks, since QuickBooks has a default expense and income account for all of your items. So if I go to transactions, I can actually see item update cabinet installation. I don't think we have a link on this one yet, but basically that way, if I open up cabinet installation for my products and services in my account here, and let me come to products and services, I'll actually see that it made the adjustment in cabinet installation to make the expense account job materials. Here we go. And then for the other item that I had just created, this one called change order, since I set these uncategorized income, uncategorized expense as the items, if I come check on that item that we created in my account here, I'll come to change order, and it used those just so we could sync it accordingly. That's just how we get a little bit more control over everything that we create. We set defaults, but of course you can always make the adjustments in your QuickBooks account as well. I think I covered just about everything that I wanted to cover around how this all works. I see I have a couple questions, so I'm going to go ahead and open up the chat here and see what I can answer for you guys. Thank you, Peter, who said super awesome power tools in Knowify. Does Knowify include a free account for pro advisors and testing? Yeah, absolutely. Peter, I don't know if you're still on the call. It looks like he headed out. I'll just email. But for anyone else who's interested, we absolutely do include a free account for pro advisors for testing. It's a full account that can be synced with QuickBooks, so you can test everything that I showed you here today. It's all just part of the service. We do have a great advisor program. These webinars are part of the CCAN, the Construction Company Advisory Network. where we're just doing some general demonstrations and training to learn, teach you a little bit more about, how everything works. But of course, we do free, one-on-one training as well if there's anything that we can do to help you out. I think that's all for today. I will be sending out an email with this recording shortly afterwards, as well as a couple of guides to help you, set this up if you ever want to give it a go on your end or anything like that. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. I'm at tkallian@knowify.com, and I'm always happy to answer any other questions about this for you. But kind of off of Peter's question about getting set up with a free account, this is why we set you up with a free account. We'd love for you to kind of get in. The best way to learn something is by doing it. So feel free to just mess around with the accounts, the defaults, use your service items to kind of just see how it's going to react in your account or eventually in your client's account. Thanks again, everyone, for joining in. Always a pleasure. And if you have any other questions, just shoot me an email, and I'm always happy to help. Have a nice rest of your week.